Welcome back. To another episode of Becca's Corner of the World. So I'm going to be honest. I recorded a whole other podcast earlier and I'm mad at how the whole thing turned out. This blog, I'm feeling very imposter syndrome-y about for some reason. And that's not even really the word. I feel very vulnerable about it, I guess. So as I've talked about, I've been through a lot, fairly traumatized. And I've been noticing a lot of people talk about being in dark places online, the days are getting shorter, the world's getting crazier. I think I talk about that in the blog. There's no reason to feel bad about feeling bad, right? We all have dark days. We all have hard times. If you don't, that's a blessing, right? That's a privilege. For the vast majority of us, dark days kind of come with the territory. And I didn't realize how little I knew before starting my own healing journey about, the mind and the way that we think and the way that we react to things. I was in a cult that had taught me a lot of the ways, but the ways were wrong. Anyway, so I'm trying to say is I feel very vulnerable about this blog because I know how hard these dark days can be. I really wanted to kind of dive deep myself, into my dark days and talk about the things that really helped me to come out of it. I'm in a much better place today, but these were some really, really dark days. And it's been really interesting seeing how tapping back into that and trying to, remember what really helped me through it. It's really triggered a lot of the same feelings again. So just a reminder that healing is not linear, and I'm not coming to you from this magical, fully healed place. I like to think that place exists. I'm still very early on in my healing journey. I like to believe that we can fully alchemize this bullshit into gold, right? But it's not a linear process, and days are going to feel good and days are going to feel bad. And you just kind of have to take the good with the bad and keep putting one foot in front of the other and, just have faith. And not from a religious standpoint, but have faith in yourself. Have faith that no matter how dark the days are right now, days have felt dark in the past and you made it through those too, keep pushing through. All right, good. I feel like I got that disclaimer out of the way, or whatever to call it. This has been a really difficult one for me to record. I've been feeling a lot of heavy anxiety and, feeling like I didn't word it all correctly. And this is just, I think part of it is this was a real hyperfixation area for me. I think that is a lot of this too, actually, now that I'm looking at that more closely. This area really became a hyperfixation. So this is also just kind of an info dump. And I think I'm a little bit introverted about that. So if you're wondering why this week's blog might feel a little bit different than others, it's me just word vomiting all kinds of ways to heal at you because I just really want to help penguin with pebbles. I'm just here. These are the things that help me feel better. Internet hug. All right, so here we go. I know I went a little bit hard last week, but I promise that last week it was from a place of love, right? Facing hard truths about ourselves is never a good time. Believe me, I know all too well how it feels to suddenly realize that you might not be as good a person as you once thought. But here's a little secret for you. Having that feeling automatically makes you a better person than a lot of the people on this planet because you're self-aware, you're acknowledging your faults, and you want to be a better person. I've noticed a lot of my friends on Threads, kind of like I was saying at the top there, talking recently about being in a really dark place mentally. Our world is in a dark place right now. Things are changing rapidly. And for a lot of us, it feels like our very lives are in danger. Situations like this can bring a lot of dark thoughts to the surface, leaving us to either handle them or succumb to them. Healing is messy work. The beginning phases can feel like you will never come out the other side. But if you can stick this part out and just keep putting one foot in front of the other, you can find yourself on the road to having your best days ahead of you. This is not about toxic positivity. That mindset is just another form of victim blaming, and it sent me spiraling more than once, almost taking me out in the process. This isn't about smiling in an effort to ignore the pain. This is about confronting and accepting that pain and smiling in spite of it. Let's get into it. Self-love during the dark days. One of the most important parts of healing your trauma is learning how to love yourself. The dark days come in when we become overwhelmed with it all, and we turn that overwhelm inwards. Suddenly, we're not just upset about the things that have happened to us. We're now blaming ourselves for it and hating ourselves because of it. We start to feel completely helpless and powerless to stop whatever it is that's happening. These thoughts can manifest in a million different ways, but they ultimately focus on blaming you for what's happening. It feels awful, but it's really important to remember that this is a weird trick your brain is playing on you to try to protect you. Because if you are to blame, then that means that somehow you did have control over it at some point, and you'll be able to have control over it in the future, so that way it can never happen to you again. Right? You have to remember here that thoughts are not facts. Just because you're thinking it, that doesn't make it true. Okay? Your brain is trying to protect you with these thoughts, but you have to not blame yourself, right? Like, whatever the thing may be. I don't want to like trigger anybody or anything, but like, yeah, you could have run, but like, really, could you have run? Right? You're going to think all kinds of things. So you have to remember that it's not true. Just because you're thinking it, no matter how real it may feel, it doesn't make it true. This is just a part of the processing period. Thoughts are not facts. These days are like a mourning period. You're going to go through all the stages of grief because you have lost something. Be it your innocence, your former identity, the partner you thought you had, your friends, the life you built, your ability to trust, your sense of self. And these are just a few of the things that I had to mourn myself in my own healing journey. If you're wondering what I'm doing here, there's a dog here beside me. I gotta give him big pets. He's all wet from the rain. The reasons are going to differ for everybody, but the phase remains the same. You have to allow yourself the time, space, and compassion to mourn any and everything that you have lost. Yes, you still have a future, and yes, you do have things to live for, but leaving things behind, no matter the circumstances, can be a significant loss. Mourn it. Things started turning around for me when I learned to treat myself with compassion. We are our own worst critics, and I definitely held my own head down in the mud during this process. Don't do that. You have to have compassion for yourself now more than ever. If you saw your friend laying on the floor in a puddle, sobbing, broken, confused, upset, exhausted, would you tell them to suck it up and go back to work? With a whole bunch of insults and gut punches thrown in there for good measure? No, you wouldn't. So don't do it to yourself. Hold your own hand through this process. When you're too exhausted to move, give yourself the time and the space to rest and heal. Hustle culture is dead. It is time for radical self-love and acceptance. We'll delve more into how exactly to go about like loving yourself. I know that sounds like such a foreign concept. We'll get more into that later on. But this part, I really want to drive this part home. There's an incredible woman that I follow on Instagram. Her handle is nottheworstcleaner_, and her name is Brogan. Sorry if that's not right. She's got like 1 million followers. You'll know when you see her. You should definitely follow her immediately. She's worked in mental health in the past, and now she offers free deep home cleanings for people who suffer with mental illnesses who are having trouble like staying on top of their housework. It's amazing work that she's doing. It's phenomenal. It's so inspiring. And she always has really, really incredible messages in her videos. And there's this one quote of hers that really started to shift the way that I thought about myself. You will never hate yourself into a version that you love. Repeat that. Memorize it, all right? You will never hate yourself into a version that you love. You have to learn to love yourself exactly as you are. Still strive to become your favorite version of yourself, right? But love yourself exactly as you are right now, because you're the person who got you here. Be appreciative, be grateful. Love yourself. Toxic positivity does not work. The road to healing is long and hard. I really only just begun, but it's starting to feel like my darkest days are behind me. I didn't just hit rock bottom. I hit bedrock, and I just kept on digging until I found magma. It felt like my dark days were never going to end. I was desperate to feel better. I do have things to live for. There's some parts of my life that I still can't talk about publicly just yet, but believe me when I say that I am surviving out of spite at this point. Getting better became a real hyperfixation for me. I hadn't been sleeping. I wasn't able to sleep. For over a year, I wasn't able to sleep. I would conk out for like maybe an hour at night, and then I would wake up in like a panic attack, like overwhelming anxiety, my stomach in knots, and I would start throwing up like immediately. And that would last every night until sometime around 5 a.m. when my body finally let me sleep for a little bit. I couldn't eat at all. I was nauseous all day. Like, it was a brutal time. The weight started to fall off of me. I felt like a walking skeleton. Everything was completely spiraling out of control, and there was nothing that I could do to stop it. But then I realized that I was the only one who could stop it. So I started studying. I would be in the bathtub for hours almost every night. It was a specific way that I found that would help me to snap myself out of that nausea. If anyone is familiar with like the ruminating thoughts, like you know, the negative thoughts just kind of swirling, and it, leads to heavy nausea. Like I was not in a great state, but the point being, like, getting in the bath, it would help me to kind of take my mind off of it. I could focus on something else. I could calm the body. So while I was in there, I started listening to podcasts. Hey, baby. Started listening to podcasts, audiobooks, and listening to or watching my comfort shows for like hours and hours on end to help ride that wave out. I was undoing over a decade of brainwashing from both occult and abusive relationships. So I just started turning to every single resource that I could find. This sent me down a lot of very interesting paths. I am agnostic, but I'm also a very spiritual person. I don't know who or what it is I'm talking to, like up, down, or over there. But, I like to think there are somebody or multiple somebodies. I like to believe in all of the gods, right? Fuck it, why not? Unfortunately, there are a lot of wolves dressed in hippie clothing or scrubs, depending what your FYP looks like. Do we say FYP or do we say For You page out loud? Just realized I think I've only read that. It's my old show. Anyway, so there's these wolves dressed in appropriate clothing, just waiting for the chance to sell you their latest snake oil that just happens to be the perfect remedy for whatever ails you. Spirituality is good, right? But victim blaming and toxic positivity disguised as spiritual healing at top dollar rates is just another form of Scientology. I was trying to change my mindset, but I was doing so from the wrong angle for a very, very long time. Every time that I started throwing up or crying again, I felt like I must have done something wrong. I would obsess over everything that I had said and done or failed to say or do, and how it inevitably must have led to me feeling bad again. My dark days were a sign of weakness, not of grief or of processing. The idea that your thoughts can change your life is absolutely a possibility, but it doesn't mean that when things go wrong, you must be doing something wrong to cause it, or that it happened just because you were thinking negatively. Life is random. Chaos rules our universe. We can only be responsible for the things that we have control over, nothing more. It is great to be able to think positively when it applies to the situation. Having a positive outlook on life is a beautiful privilege that everyone deserves to experience. And this can be achieved again after trauma, but you won't get there by ignoring the negatives. Shadow work. Learn to love your dark side. There is a lot of brainwashing that comes along with being in an abusive relationship, or really just existing in the current society. They slowly convince you that you are worthless, pathetic, weak, and that you deserve the abuses against you. Undoing this takes a lot of work and self-awareness. It is important to acknowledge both what was done to you, but also what you did. This isn't about blame, right? Many truths can exist at once. Just because you haven't been perfect, that doesn't excuse anybody else's bad actions against you. But holding on to those things that you're ashamed of, that opens you up to feeling like you deserve it. Start acknowledging your shortcomings. I promise you, you are not as bad as you think. Hiding it from yourself only makes it worse. This step was especially hard for me. Yes, I was abused and traumatized, right? Fair. But I also joined a cult. I was a counselor and a minister in Scientology. And I said and did things during that decade that I would never do under any other circumstances. But that does not change the fact that I did them and that they were bad things to do. It took a lot of work, but I can now acknowledge that I did awful things, but that I did them thinking that I was doing what was best for the world. Especially as women, we are convinced that unless we are perfect at all times, we are worthless. If I can't be of service, why am I even here? This was my great undoing. I bottomed out. For months, I existed solely on the couch and the bathroom floor, like a 20-foot radius. I was already struggling to process my past. And now here I was years later, and I'm too sick to be able to even lift a finger for months on end. My entire sense of self-worth was shattered. I was useless. I added no value to the world. What was the point? If this spiral sounds familiar, you have come to the right place. Instead of running from your dark, you have to embrace it. Here's a fun little activity for you. Imagine that you're Morticia Addams and you're speaking to your own Gomez. You know that man loves his dark queen. Write it in a journal. Do it in your head. You don't have to say this out loud, right? Go with whatever works best for you. But feed him your dark. You don't get anywhere pretending that these places don't exist. We all have demons waiting in the wings to take us out. Dive in and shine the fucking spotlight on them. I was sickeningly codependent. I did not know who I was outside of a relationship. I completely relied on the opinions of others to dictate my entire life. I have hair on my big toes. I snooped through my ex's phone when I thought that he was cheating on me. I allowed a cult to completely take over my identity. And these are just a few of the things that I feel comfortable with admitting on the internet. Dive in. You have no idea just how freeing this activity can be. Unburden your soul. Let the dark out. That is the only way to move forward and do better. Flip the script. This stage of my healing, I like to refer to as my ego death. I'm sure I'm not even using that term correctly. But for me, there was no better way to describe it. Everything that I thought I was, every belief that I held, every random thought that I had throughout the day, I ripped them all out of my head and I laid them on the floor before me. Which of these are true? And which should I toss in the fire? Because here's another little secret for you. Your brain lies to you. An activity that I did with one of my therapists was to start isolating those negative thoughts. Things like, I'm a failure, I'm weak, I'm a bad person, I'm not worthy of love. Take some time to really think about the negative thoughts that cloud you the most often, right? Which ones are clouding your mind? And write them down. Now, flip the script. I can succeed. I am strong. I am a good person. I am worthy exactly as I am. Look for evidence to back up these good thoughts. Those negative voices, that inner critic, they love throwing evidence back in your face. Anytime those negative thoughts start, suddenly there's always an avalanche of memories coming in right behind them to prove them right? Every single time. You know this feeling. One thing happens and all of a sudden you're crying over everything. You have to start training your brain to spot and stop these thoughts as they're coming in. It takes time, but it is possible. Then immediately start looking for the evidence to contradict them. Look for examples of times that you did succeed. Look for examples of times that you were strong enough. Remind yourself that you are worthy simply because you exist. Even if the only thing you have to go on is blind faith that it will all turn around, that can be enough. Speaking 100% from personal experience on that one. My sister just got some incredible news. It's her story to share. I don't want to take her thunder from her, but seriously, miracles can happen. Mantras made me roll my eyes at first. Full disclosure, I couldn't do it. Trying to tell myself that I'm worthy and I'm beautiful, randomly throughout the day. It felt so unbelievably cringe. It was not for me, but I was determined to stop hating myself, right? I was willing to try anything. I couldn't remember to repeat stuff to myself throughout the days, ADHD brain that wasn't happening. So I started listening to guided meditations throughout the day instead. And then from there, I found affirmation music, not just like the cheesy full-on affirmation music, but honestly, I really do love that too. But like these different amazing women and singers, or women singers and rappers with lyrics that were focused on female empowerment and like reclaiming your power. People like Queen Herbie, Tony Jones, and Shannon Blake. I'm going to put together a playlist. And then one day it actually started to work. I know, I couldn't believe it either. And it took a really long time. It did not come naturally. But over time, I slowly started to shift that negative voice in my head into my biggest cheerleader. This only happens with repetition. You can't do it once, twice, 6 times in a day and think, oh, why aren't I fixed yet? Like, no, you have to do this all day, every day. Think about just how many negative thoughts you have about yourself throughout the day. It's a lot, right? You have to replace that. You've now got to start spotting and stopping them as they happen, and then replacing them with even more positive thoughts about yourself. That is the only way to right this ship. This takes time, work, and dedication, but you can do it. And eventually you won't even have to think about it anymore. Like, if you wouldn't say it to your best friend, don't say it to yourself, period. I didn't go more into the music in the blog here, but like, if you struggle with affirmations and stuff as well, and if you struggle with like stopping those negative thoughts, listening to music that is really like affirmation music in disguise, like the people that I mentioned above, and there's a ton of them out there. Any songs with lyrics that are about feeling amazing and feeling your best and loving yourself, right? The more that you listen to those and you get those lyrics stuck in your head, if you're anything like me, I get a little bop in my head and I'm just repeating it over and over and over. I stim with music as well. Having those lines stuck in your head, like, I am powerful, I am worthy, I am amazing, I hold space for myself, like, that changed everything. I'll really work on putting together an awesome playlist because, like, whew, it's good stuff. All right, let's wrap it up. This is really just the baby steps to healing. I think that's a lot of why I have such imposter syndrome on this, because like anyone who's really like done anything in the land of healing is going to look at this and be like, seriously, like, you wrote a blog on this? Like, yeah, because I knew none of this when I first started. Like, these were the baby steps that I needed to take. I remember talking to somebody when it first started, and I mentioned something about like, oh yeah, my anxiety is lying to me, like, it, referring to it as it being a separate entity. And they're like, well, you already know more than I do, because like I wasn't even thinking like that. Like, they hadn't had that realization, like, oh yeah, my anxiety is going to make me think things that they're not true. You don't have to believe it. Like, these feel like really basic steps, but I think there are a lot of really important tools that not a lot of us know. They don't teach this shit in school, and they should. So what works for me might not work for you, and that is okay too. You're going to figure out what works for you and you're going to make it work, and I love that for you. But the key points do remain the same here. You have to have compassion for yourself, and you have to start paying attention to how you think and speak about yourself. My sister was really, really great for this one. When I first, her and I think we're kind of going through like the same journey, and really realized how often I say awful things about myself. And she started calling me on it every time. Start, like, if you have friends and family who will support you like this, start asking them to start calling you on it, and you're going to get annoyed with yourself really, really quick. My new one is my apologizing for just existing. I'm sorry I do that. I'm working on it. Okay, the key points remain the same. Have compassion for yourself. Start paying attention to how you think and speak about yourself. Acknowledge and embrace your faults instead of hiding from them. Understand that your brain will lie to you, and start feeding it positive things to think instead. Healing is no joke. Please make sure to talk to your doctor if you are struggling. The steps above would not have been possible for me if I was not also on a whole mess of medication. Let's call it like it is. Mental health is important, and you need to take care of yourself. Talk to your doctor and see if you can get a therapist too. I know therapy is really expensive, but there are free options out there. I could not afford therapy. I went through some place locally that I think it was part of like new therapists getting their final qualifications. You could get therapy for free through them. Now I'm through like the mental health clinic. I'm with a great trauma therapist. Like, there are lots of free options out there. It might mean waiting, but that time is going to go by anyway. You might as well have it pass with you on a list. Why not? Have compassion for yourself. Learn to love yourself, not in spite of it all, but because of it all. You are an incredible person and you deserve to be here. Never forget it. Yeah, that was this week's blog. This was kind of a rough one for me. I don't know what parts I'm going to be like keeping in or editing out, but like this was a little bit triggering for me this week. I know, like I keep saying, healing is not linear, and oftentimes remembering those hard days are going to bring them back on you a little bit. But I think it's also important to take note that even though you might get triggered, hey puppy, and you might have bad days again, they're not as bad as your worst days, right? It can be like a scale, like it, even if you dip, you can still go back up higher, right? Put a little line in there. So don't beat yourself up for having hard days, hard times. Have compassion for yourself. Even when you feel like you're way past this point, like I really had to keep reminding myself of this today, because again, it's easy to feel like you're past it now and be like, oh, girl, suck it up and get back to work. Like, nope, step one, compassion. Like, it's hard, but it's a new muscle to flex, and I invite you to do the same. Like, start being your own best friend, start being your biggest cheerleader. Let yourself rest when you need to rest. Let yourself dance when you need to dance. Be silly, be sad, be whatever you need to be. All right, so yeah, I have no idea what I'm going to do next week, but I'll try to make it something happier or funnier maybe. I feel like I've been a Debbie Downer lately. See what else I can come up with. You see that? That was me just insulting myself. We all have work to do. I never had any of these things. Yeah, so that was this week's blog. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got something from this. Again, I think I just feel really weird about this one because it felt like more of like a weird info dump, but it was just, I've been seeing a lot of people struggling, and I want to let you know you're not alone, and these are some of the things that really helped me. I couldn't really fit them into like a short little thread format, so I just thought I'd info dump it all here for you, and hopefully it helps somebody. And at the very least, this will be a podcast to help put someone to sleep. So like, that's something. Sweet dreams, and I'll see you soon. Bye.